Welcome to the Health Leader Forge, where today's health leaders help to forge the leaders of tomorrow. I'm your host, Mark Bonica, of the University of New Hampshire's Department of Health Management and Policy and the Northern New England Association of Healthcare Executives. Our website is healthleaderforge.org, where you can find information about subscribing to the podcast, links and information related to the episode, as well as our complete archives. Today's guest is Gerald Gerry Vicenzi, the President of Synernet, Inc. Synernet is a for-profit provider of a broad portfolio of administrative and management services to healthcare organizations including workers' compensation administration, clinical engineering, credentialing, coding, and transcription. Gerry has been the president of Synernet since 1999, and under his leadership, Synernet has grown from 25 to more than 270 employees. Gerry brought a wealth of experience with him when he moved from Cleveland, Ohio to Portland, Maine, where Synernet is headquartered. Starting out his career as an industrial engineer, it is fascinating to hear how his engineering background influenced his management approach. He shares his successes and struggles over his 43-year career. We discuss organizational leadership and mentorship and close on the importance of networking through professional organizations such as ACHE. I was particularly interested in interviewing Gerry because Synernet represents a very different kind of organization than we have had on the podcast so far. It was fascinating to listen to how he made strategic decisions to adjust the portfolio of services over the years in response to changes in the marketplace, changes in technology, and changes in the competitive environment for his clients. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Don't forget to leave us feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or wherever you may be accessing this recording. Also, you can find us on Twitter at the handle @HealthLF. That's @HealthLF. Thanks for listening, and here is Gerry Vicenzi. Welcome to the Forge, Gerry.
Glad to be here.
So you earned both your bachelor's and master's degrees from Rensselaer Polytech Institute in management engineering. Why did you go to RPI, and why did you choose management engineering? And what is that as a field?
Well, I grew up in as a baby boomer and the son of immigrants who had elementary school education, but understood the value of education and always preached the need for their children to get a college education. And so it wasn't really ever an option in my mind, even though my father was a skilled laborer and had a real good skilled trade that I could have learned. He was always,
you're going to go to college.
You got to go to college.
Okay.
You have to go to college.
But why RPI and why
RPI? Because, interestingly, things don't always work like the way you want them to work. So in those days, we applied to 3 schools. Your top school, your middle school, and your safe school.
Yeah.
And I didn't get into my top school.
Okay. Okay.
Which was Brown University.
And most people don't.
And so I wanted to go away, and my safe school was Northeastern. That was Boston.
Okay.
So it was RPI.
RPI is a very good school.
RPI is an excellent school, and actually I think its profile has risen substantively in the past. Since we left, I don't know if I'd be accepted there now. But
right.
And I thought I wanted to be an engineer. I had fairly good math and science grades. My English, I wasn't ever an A student in English and in writing and creative writing and all that. Right. I actually write very well.
Okay.
From a business side, but I was never there. So I just
different skills.
I just thought that engineering was a good fit for me, and when I got there, I found that some of the technical stuff was a little too technical for me, and so management, industrial engineering afforded the ability to work with people and process, and so I'm an organized person, and I just thought it was a real good fit.
So was it it's not something you knew about before you got there, but you learned about it when you got there?
I didn't know about it at all. Okay. I thought I was going to be an engineer of some sort.
And you stayed and got your master's degree?
That was...
Or did you do that later?
No, I did. I stayed and got my master's degree because when I was a senior, RPI received a grant from the Kellogg Foundation to train industrial engineers to work in hospitals.
Okay.
And it was kind of an easy decision. It was like, you want to go to grad school? So when you look at your career prior to that question, it's like, I've been going to school all my life. I mean, why shouldn't I go to school again?
Yeah. And did you know, industrial engineering kind of was something you discovered once you got to RPI.
Yeah.
What about healthcare? I mean, so it was this master's was specifically healthcare. Had you had thoughts that, hey, I'd like to work in healthcare?
Actually, interestingly,
or was this kind of an opportunity?
While I was a senior, I had started working part-time at the New York Hospital Association in Albany. And they had a consulting group that did a broad range of things for hospitals around the state. And so I was a technician, as they called them in those days. And, I basically did spreadsheets before they had spreadsheets, edited data cards before you couldn't do stuff online. I mean, I was a technician, and I got engaged with healthcare there. And it just happened that...
And then the master's was offered?
The RPI offered the master's in healthcare, and my career path was chosen.
Wow, how
neat. Divined, I guess. Okay. I didn't choose it. Yeah, so I'd like to think... You'd like to think you're a little more conscious. I guess, I don't know. I'd like to think that I would have been a little more conscious about the decision, but I wasn't. I mean, in reality, it occurred.
Yeah.
And sometimes things like that happen in life, as you learn later in life. Sometimes, doors open, one closes, another one opens, and you move through the door. And I have another situation later that I'll talk about that occurred. So when I left there, my first job was actually working for a hospital association in Rhode Island.
Okay.
As a management engineer. They had a shared, it's interesting, my first job was in a shared services organization that was part of the Hospital Association of Rhode Island.
Interesting.
The Hospital Association does typically advocacy and public policy work, and in many states they have service arms. They have a service arm, and they just happen to have a service arm that, at the time included one of the first industrial engineering programs to be shared by hospitals in New England.
Okay. So you're kind of a consultant then?
Yes, so I was a consultant. I was a staff consultant, and we worked around the state of Rhode Island at different hospitals doing process improvement and productivity improvement work before it was popular.
Oh, neat. Wow.
So I think that was probably the best part of that job was that I really finally began to understand that I had something to contribute. When I went out of school, I felt like I got all this education, but I don't know how I'm really going to apply it to the real world.
Okay.
And how does it really work? And my first job just gave me, good footing. I mean, and I was fortunate. I actually worked for one hospital in Newport, Rhode Island. I did a lot of work at Newport, so that was really nice. I believe Providence take a nice drive to Newport. That's just pretty nice. But there was a gentleman there named Bob Healy who was the COO. And what I find in life is that sometimes people see more in you than you see in yourself.
Yeah.
Bob Healy saw a lot of me.
Oh, nice.
So I did a lot of work for Bob directly. He had these projects he needed done and, required, either, process work or working with, I had to work with the director of the labs at the time who was an ornery pathologist. But, he needed help buying a new analyzer.
Yeah.
And, and Bob said, hey, I need an economic comparison of what he's buying, and what the advantages are and the disadvantages. So, and I mean, Bob treated me like I say, at that time as a 24-year-old, Bob treated me as an equal. I mean, my opinion mattered. I mean,
okay.
It was great.
So he's kind of a mentor to you.
He was kind of a mentor in those days when I look back on it. It really made me feel, actually he and the other individual was a CFO there named Everett Camps, which was just wonderful to work for. Especially when like I said, you're fresh out of school.
Yeah.
You really don't know what you have to say. Is it really going to be accepted? Does it really mean anything? Mm-hmm. So it was a great experience. And I left there because I really thought I wanted a more high-profile consultative role. I mean, I get involved. Actually, at the time, I actually got involved in the Hospital Management Systems Society, which today is HIMSS and is one of the biggest. At the time, it was hospital management. I mean, I started my involvement with professional organizations way back then.
Okay.
Found that networking opportunity that you get from being with other professionals in your discipline really valuable.
Yeah.
And as a result, I was exposed to, larger consulting, organizations like Ernst & Young, or there's Ernst & Ernst at the time. I think it's Ernst & Winnie now, Arthur Anderson. And so, about 3 years into my job, I really decided I really needed to look for something a little more high profile. So I interviewed in Chicago with two companies, Ernst & Ernst at the time, and a company called the Medica Systems Corporation. And in 76, I took a job with Medica Systems in Chicago at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital. They had an on-site program there to provide management engineering services, and they also outsourced the data processing facilities. And they was outsourced for. So Medicus's concept in those days was that business process and industrial engineering and computer systems should be one.
Okay.
So to try to meld the three disciplines together in a company, and they were very successful. They had some really substantive, some well-regarded clients at the time. So Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's became my home base with Medicus, and I spent about 2 years there and did a variety of different projects for Rush. And then career progresses, and someone sits you down and says, well, we got a next opportunity for you. And I'm going, wow, this is wonderful. I've only been here 2 years. I got another opportunity. It means I'm doing good work. I'm being rewarded. And I say, I'm all primed. They've got hospitals in Texas, Florida, California. Because they go, we want you to move to Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, all right. That was probably at the top of your list.
Just a little bit of a setback.
Okay.
In fact, I remember I was in Biloxi, Mississippi at the annual HMSS meeting that February and talking to people, and they go, you're going where? You're going to Cleveland? It was a blizzard of 78. It smothered the East Coast. Midwest was in one of those years. And so in 78, I moved to Cleveland, Ohio, and doing the same work with Medicus for Mount Sinai Medical Center.
Okay.
And I was the manager for the program at Mount Sinai Medical Center. So
okay.
I got a promotion, and I transferred to Cleveland, Ohio, and there began let me think back about a 13-year relationship with Mount Sinai Medical Center.
Right.
First as a consultant, then as an employee, in two different stints of employment.
Okay. All right. So eventually you were the vice president of support services for Mount Sinai.
Right.
Okay.
That was my last round at Mount Sinai.
So you'd been there, you'd left and come back.
Yeah, I'd been there. I guess still struggling to find an identity in my late 20s, and I know I was getting tired of the consultative role because I felt consulting, you give advice, and then people don't do what you tell them to do. And you become credenza-ware, a nice report on a shelf. And although I have to say, there was a gentleman at Mount Sinai Medical Center who, similar to Bob Healy, was the COO there, Warren Greenwald, who really appreciated the work I did. We just got along fabulously, and that eventually came back to pay dividends for me. But about 3 years into that stint, I got one of these wanderlust things that I was going to just go out west and go skiing for a year. And the folks who ran the company said, hey, I got a great situation for you in Saudi Arabia. And I said, Saudi Arabia? Well, the company that I worked for, Medicus, had sold their consultative interests to a large conglomerate who just managed to operate hospitals for the Ministry of Defense and Aviation in Saudi Arabia. And they had loaned talent to that division over the course of the 2 years. And they said, hey, I got an assignment over there for you for 4 months. So why don't you go do that? And you come back, you can figure out whether you want to go do something else.
Okay. So they knew you were kind of burning out maybe a little bit, and just gave you something different.
Gave me something different to do. I sort of really a fascinating experience traveling in the Middle East. Even in those days, it was a little scary. Scary because it's totally different. It's not Western culture.
Right.
So I spent 4 months there, and the nice part about that is it wasn't even 4. It was more like 3.5. I got an extra 4 weeks of vacation in addition to the one. That was my deal.
Okay.
My deal was 4 weeks vacation, extra weeks vacation, and so I traveled. Went to Egypt for about a week and a half and did all the pyramids and down to Luxor, and then came back and then went to the Greek islands. Then worked my way back from Greece up through Italy, over to France. And I get to Paris. Actually, I had met my mother and my sister there because we actually have relatives in France. And by the time I get to Paris, I was about 6 or 7 weeks into my travels. And my goal was to go. That was time to go home.
Yeah.
I got on a plane in Paris, came back to the United States, and then spent about 2 or 3 months getting on a plane every week out of Boston, working for Medic, back doing consulting work.
Okay.
And that was never, being a road warrior was never my thing in life. And I got a call from Mount Sinai, and they said, well, why don't you come back here and work for us? We got an opportunity for you to come back and work for us. And so I moved back to Cleveland, Ohio, went to work for Mount Sinai Medical Center.
And you were there for quite a while, as you said.
Probably 9 years.
Okay.
Interrupted by a brief 1-year stint in the headhunting and recruiting business.
Oh, is that your work as leadership strategies?
No.
Okay.
No.
That was something else.
That was after the fact. So I went, it's amazing. Things change in organizations, leaders change, some things stay constant. But I had left for a year. I don't remember the whole situation, why I had left, but still, I'd actually decided, I wanted to try to do something where I was a little more vested in the enterprise. And I had met this individual who was a real professional. He'd been in the banking industry, and he had basically bought a recruitment and practice for accountants, from a national, and he was the principal, and he was looking for additional people to work with him, particularly on the technology side. Because I wasn't a programmer or an IT person, my experience was I had them working in my organization and working with him, and he was looking for someone who understood those kinds of things. So I went to work for him for a year, and that was a real postgraduate education in my mind, because it taught me about making a call in sales.
Okay.
Which is something they don't teach you in college.
Yeah. And could you even learn that in a classroom, you think?
I don't think you learn that in a class. Really, that's a school of hard knocks.
Right.
Right. Because it's like, here's a directory of people to call. Here's the phone. Go make your calls.
Wow.
Introduce yourself. Get to know people. And it worked. It was real difficult to start. And by the end of the first year, I was beginning to gain traction. And then I got a call from Mount Sinai again. My friend Warren again, he goes, things have changed again here. We need you to come back again. We're going to make you a vice president.
Wow.
And give you, secure. I was in this business. It was a commission business. So,
yeah.
The first year was not very lucrative.
Right.
So, at that point, I got married the same year.
Okay. So a little stability was appealing at that point.
Stability was appealing. That wanderlust kind of thing of took me to Saudi Arabia, took me from Rhode Island to Chicago. It's like, I need some stability here.
Okay.
I hardly wonder a lot, but so I went back and I served there for 5 or 6 years as vice president of support services. And
so what was that role?
That role was basically coordinating the functions of administrative support functions in the organization, environmental services, food services, supply chain, security, non-clinical oriented functions within the organization, safety. That's a difficult one to be in charge of, but
right. Yeah.
Safety and security, those are very difficult things to be responsible for, but as an administrator responsible for it. And it was really, what I really learned there was the value of teamwork and having a team. I had great people working for me, and part of that was the fact that I recruited at least 3 or 4 of them. And I realized how important it was. Just if you are in an executive role and you have broad responsibilities, to have really, really strong leaders working for you.
Okay.
Well, that taught me that very, very clearly and distinctly. And so I spent my 5 or 6 years there, and then I got caught in the downsizing.
So the hospital was downsizing?
The hospital downsized,
okay.
Yeah. And
So this was kind of like the late 80s?
This was like the early 90s.
Early 90s. So we're seeing the effects of PPS, probably?
Yeah, right. Prospective payment system had begun, and it was somewhat a bit of a, what's the word? I would call it a slap in the face. More of like how could this possibly happen? I mean,
really
2 months ago, well, you're doing such a great job, Gerry. We really appreciate what, and then, 2 months later, it's like, sorry, we're cutting out your position. And, organizational politics, dynamics, or whatever it was. I mean, I got caught up, with probably about 20 or 30 other key people. So it wasn't just a small, but it was, and what had happened in that 12-year time frame, or that time frame at Mount Sinai, is I really focused on the job internally, had kind of let any kind of network exterior to the organization drop. So I wasn't interrelating a lot with people external to my job.
You had made that a point early in your career, though.
Right. I had made it a point early in my career, and had kind of not realized the positives and importance of that. Okay. Until I was in this situation, and I was subsequently. Well, they were in those days. That's scary. 25 years ago, or more than 20 years ago, organizations were pretty generous with their severance and packages, and so we had a really decent severance package. And besides that, we had full outplacement services. So not outplacement services where I had an office to go to every day. Can get up every morning, get dressed, go to an office, have access to, those are expensive kind of service. They don't do that kind of outplacement anymore. Right. But it was, that was a reawakening experience for me in terms of the need to really just build a network of people, and to be out there. And in that time frame, when I couldn't find another opportunity or another role, I started that consulting practice to do work, which kind of leveraged off what I basically knew. That was my focus. It's like, what can I leverage off of this? Right. I know a little about leadership. I've managed, a unit of an organization, and I understand the importance of being a leader and of having sound people working for you and good managers, and, and relying on them. I understood systems and productivity and process. And so I tried to combine something into a practice to do work. And, it's tough. It's a tough go being an independent consultant.
Well, you've got to build that practice.
You got to build the practice. You got to build the presence.
Build your network again.
Huh?
Build your network.
You got to build your network. Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe, I put together I still may have it somewhere. Very nice brochure.
Yeah.
Kind of describing what we do, who we are. And I was really proud of but you get out there and kind of secure a few engagements. I secured a few engagements, small ones, nothing really large. And in the middle of this process, I got a phone call from a headhunter. And this dates back, we got your name from Mount Sinai Medical Center a year ago. Would you be interested in talking to us about this opportunity at the Greater Cleveland Hospital Association? And so I'm looking at so I'm going to, so I said to myself, so the headhunter, I remember I said to the headhunter, he goes, would you be interested in talking? I go, well, I gotta look at my schedule, the consulting. Yeah, right. Yeah, when can we get together? Okay. And so one thing led to another, and once again, I opted for stability. Interestingly, my son was born that same year. So I had a 1-year-old in 92, or in the fall of 92, I had a 1-year-old. My wife and I had moved from our home, which I had bought. We bought this really nice home on a golf course, and it's a very nice home. And when I lost my job at Sinai, after about 9 months, it was like, we're going to do something. We really can't. So we rented the house out for 2 years. Wow. So we were living in a condo, We were paying rent, but we were renting the house in a condo. It's making a little, but so the job The association was kind of a safe harbor in a way. I didn't, and I looked at it that. That's what someone says. It's a safe harbor, Gerry. You should take it. Just go there and take it. So what was I doing for them? I was their vice president for materials management services. Again, back to my roots. It's another association, advocacy, public policy, public health initiatives in the greater Cleveland area with a big services arm. They had a big services arm, and one of the big services was group buying, group purchasing. And despite the fact that I had not had hands-on experience with the purchasing function of the supply chain, it had reported to me at Mount Sinai Medical Center, and I understood it, and I knew it. And the CEO at the association chose me for this job over a couple of people who actually were directors of materials management at local institutions. And I get to know those guys pretty well over the course of the next 7 years because they became my customers. But again, in that case, Wayne Rice, someone seeing something in you that you necessarily see in yourself. I mean, you have value to offer that, sometimes that's not intrinsically apparent to you as your career develops. Some people have this overwhelming self-confidence. Not everybody does. Sure. I could say I didn't.
Yeah.
So Wayne saw something in me. I went to work there, and in 7 years, we grew that group purchasing program to $250 million in gross purchases from like 70 or 80 million. And we had customers in Ohio and in Michigan. At the same time, I also took responsibility for another service that they had, which was medical coding. Okay, they had a medical coding pool, which is something we try to do here. We have a medical coding service now here. What was unique, the unique thing that made it successful in Cleveland was that you had a concentration in a small geography of, let's say 60 miles by 40 miles, where someone who worked at this hospital might want to moonlight at night and make a couple extra bucks on the other side of town. And I had a person who was the director of that program that knew every coder in Northeast Ohio. And so we had a very successful service where we basically helped hospitals with their coding backlogs. Even in those days, coding backlogs were always an issue. So I was responsible for that function there. What I really liked about that is, back to my experiences at Sinai, I was external to the organizations, dealing with multiple organizations. And I liked that. I liked being an outsider, not being necessarily inside the hospital. And I said, I'll never really go back to being inside a hospital again.
Okay. You made that call while you were at the hospital association.
I'm not going to go back to being inside a hospital again. I really liked you get to see multiple organizations, meet with multiple CEOs, meet with multiple directors of material. You just broaden your perspective on a lot of things, which is why I really believe that sometimes executives treat suppliers as vendors, as opposed to treating them as partners. Suppliers have a great perspective. If they're a good vendor and they're smart, they've got perspectives that you don't get in an individual organization because they're out in the marketplace talking to multiple organizations. They see what goes on there. And, they bring that kind of value, that experience to the table when they talk to you. So I really enjoyed my role there, but it was a little restrictive in terms of my autonomy.
Okay. How so?
So I started understanding what autonomy is about, which is like, I really like the work you're doing. I'm going to give you a $2,000 increase next week.
Okay.
Little things like that.
Yeah.
Which I didn't have the latitude to do.
I see.
I didn't have the latitude to do things. I had a lot of latitude to do a lot of stuff with customers and no latitude in terms of managing the people that have to service my customers. So that's kind of I think it was the organization. It's just that's the way it was. It is limiting in that regard. And while I was there, I got engaged with the National Trade Association that represented health industry. It represented group purchasing, which is called the Health Industry Group Purchasing Association.
Okay.
And I attended one of their meetings, and I don't know, the executive director of the organization took a shining or liking to me, and So he asked me to sit on a committee. Sit on the committee? Can you sit on this committee? Well, eventually I ended up running through all the chairs there. I mean, I became, treasurer and then chairman and then past chairman, and I did the whole route.
Was this of the national organization?
Yeah, it's a national Health Industry Group Purchasing Association.
Okay.
And, as a small organ, we were a small piece of it from a purchasing perspective. We had a lot of big players that were part of that. But the value of those relationships and that networking, wow, God. Well, the value of that networking and those relationships got me the job in Maine.
Okay. So,
because a recruiter from Whit Kiefer, obviously was talking to other people, the Group Purchasing Association, who's around, who might be interested in these kind of opportunities. And, Synernet had a big place in group purchasing. That was our first foray as a collaborative organization. It was group buying and group purchasing. And so the recruiter finds me and says, hey, I got an opportunity. And I'd started, like I said, I felt a little, it's time for another move.
Yeah.
I got an opportunity.
7 years, 5, 6, 7
I've been there
years.
7 years,
So,
And I got an opportunity in Maine. Maine? I go, yeah, I think I know that's north of Massachusetts. I think I've been there once.
Yeah.
And she's talking to me, well, you could be the CEO of this organization. And I go, well, it sounds like an opportunity I need to think about.
Okay.
I had never really thought about being the CEO of an organization.
So that was not something you were aspiring to, pursuing?
I wasn't aspiring to it. I was just aspiring to certain things that I aspire to. Having responsibility, having autonomy, having the opportunity to make things happen. I mean, and having been in a number of organizations going, I can make those kind of decisions just like all those guys did. Why can't I do that? I mean, I can make them. I can make them just as bad or just as good. Hopefully I'm going to make them more good ones than bad ones.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't aspiring and looking for that kind of, and I said to somebody, I said, it could have been the CEO of a popcorn stand, but the idea of having my own responsibility and autonomy to make something happen really, really appealed to me.
When that offer was made to you.
And so in February of 99, I had been up here once or twice, and they had said, well, we need to come back the next time. You need to bring your wife with you. You should probably bring your wife. So we came up here on Valentine's Day of 99, actually. It was Valentine's Day week. And I said, well, you've never been to Maine. Why don't you come with me? Who knows where this is going to go? I still was not like, they're going to pick me. And I went through I had to go through a round of interviews again. And she came up here and she kind of go, I think I could live here.
Yeah?
It was like, you think so? Because so, within a month of that, they made me a job offer, and I decided to come to Maine. In April of 99, I moved here.
Okay.
Left my family back in Ohio. We had moved back into the house we had bought. After I'd worked at GCHA for a year, we had moved back into the house. My son was 7. I think it was a good time to move. My wife was... She was really good about the move in terms of, I'm excited about doing something different.
Yeah.
It was a real challenge when we first got here. For both of us, from the perspective of a big relocation is like that. I knew what the dynamics, I kind of had an idea what the dynamics were of being CEO, of assuming responsibility for an organization. I could rationalize that, make my notes about how I was going to handle this, how I was going to introduce myself to people, all those kinds of things. From a business perspective, that wasn't as much of a challenge as the personal situation of uplifting and breaking 20 plus years of relationships and personal relationships and friendships and all that kind of stuff, being dropped in a new area, not knowing anybody.
Knew nobody, had been here once before.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but we, first year there were countless times I go, man, I hope this is the right thing we did. Back and forth, but we got through that. And I think part of interestingly, I always attribute part of the positive aspect of having a child later in life, because I was 42, my wife was almost 40 when Chase was born. was that he really was. That's how we built our relationships. Through school,
right?
We didn't have a child going to school. If we had, it was our older daughter was grown out of the house and living in New York City when we moved here. She's 40 now, so I mean, it's just, that whole thing of having. So we settled here, and like I said, in '99, and I came on board. And Synernet was a hospital co-op that had been started by the smaller community hospitals in the state to collaborate and gain economies and efficiencies. And
in particularly for purchasing,
right? For purchasing of any kind of goods and services. And there was a underlying animus regarding the larger organizations in the state. So, Eastern Maine up in Bangor, Maine Medical Center here in Portland, because it was always like, all they want to do is dominate, take, et cetera, and they really don't want to do anything for us. And so this was kind of a little bit of and it became like, and it was a collaborative, and they did a lot of collaborative other things besides purchasing. They had, they have collaborative groups looking at different, they had a great collaborative group that looked at pharmacy, medication errors. So they brought together their pharmacists to look at medication errors. Back in the 90s, they were tracking them in a card punch kind of driven computer system. But they were doing some innovative things to try to get on top of the things that they needed to get on top of as a collaborative organization. And that started.
Were they doing that through Synernet?
Yeah, through Synernet.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I came on board, though, in '99, the collaborative was about 12 years old, and it had begun to wane in terms of members leaving and not paying their dues, not wanting to pay dues, because it was a dues-driven organization, even though we had services, and we'd started a few services, and the Maine Health had started and had actually brought Brighton Medical Center, which was here in town, and they were in the process of they brought on a couple other hospitals, Stevens Memorial out in St. Andrews, and Miles up in Damariscotta, and so, the systemization had begun. It was a wave of systemization. And so some of the smaller guys were like, independence. We're remaining independence no matter what we can do. We need to do everything we can do to retain our independence. And so that's why they decided to continue to sustain Synernet. And so my vision when I came on board was, I think we've tried to delve into areas that are not within our competency. I think the things we're really doing well are those things that are administrative and really lend themselves to economic consolidation of services and expertise that you can share. The work that, the workers' comp, the clinical engineering, the group purchasing, some of these other clinical things we were trying to, at the time they tried to do what do we call it? I'm sorry. Community health improvement initiative across all their entities. Well, community health is something that's locally driven, but you can't aggregate stuff across. The idea might have been sound. It might have been, but it just had the devil's in the details. It didn't work. They spent a lot of money on consultants and trying to get plans, and then they had also tried to put together a managed care network to compete with the contracting issues that were going on in the prospective payment system, and put together a managed care network without an anchor tertiary care hospital as one of your anchors. How can you have a real good managed care network to provide services that, all those initiatives have failed, and they really, from a financial perspective, they lost $250,000 a year before I got here. But there was still this need for some of the hospitals that we need to maintain the positive aspects of the organization and this collaborative focus. And so that's when I came on board. And so it was really a turnaround in a way, in a turnaround and a build. And so
how did your experiences prior to coming to Synernet, what do you think best prepared you for the role that you then took on in 1999?
I think it's a little of everything.
Okay.
Because I think the engineering mentality and the process focus just lends itself to problem solving, no matter what the problem is. So the problem here is like how to sustain this organization and find new ways to grow it and build new services. So it's a problem. And in an analytical engineer's mind, it's a problem. What do we do? What are the steps we need to take? How do we implement the steps and put together some information to assess? And then if we see how it works, and if it doesn't work, let's it's kind of, modify the process and come back and try again. I think that whole engineering discipline and mentality, I think having worked inside a hospital, particularly, it was a real value to me because I've had people who've worked for us in this organization over the past X number of years who have come to us from not having been inside the customer. So I really understood the inside of the hospital.
So it was important that you had done that stint.
Yeah.
As an employee at Mount Sinai.
Yeah, right. Because I really understood the inner workings of the hospital. And particularly all this kind of administrative service related functions, which is what we were talking about. I'm not talking about radiological functions here,
right.
Or like clinical functions. And then the third aspect, I think, was the experience at Greater Cleveland Hospital Association dealing with services provided to a diverse group of organizations and hospitals. Not providing service, from like a supply chain organization within a hospital, but services to multiple organizations and multiple customers and understanding customer service and what that means if you want to be the supplier or program of choice for a hospital. So I think all that combined to make, really, it's interesting when I look at it. All those three elements, the analytical engineering piece, the hands-on experience inside a hospital, and then the third piece of having worked in a setting where I dealt with multiple customers. Because we've frequently looked, and we sometimes look at talent in some of our services. This is a good example in our credentialing service, arena, where we provide shared credentialing services for like 40 or 50 organizations. Frequently, some of our customers end up being medical staff offices at the hospitals, and medical staff offices go through transitions and turnovers, and frequently, Cheryl Schulke will tell me, she goes, well, what's her name at Joan at, XYZ Hospital is no longer there. And I go, wow, geez, I thought she was a really good customer. We really liked her. And she goes, yeah. I go, well, you think she'd be she goes, not necessarily.
A good hire for Synernet.
Yeah, would she be a good fit for us? Not necessarily.
Okay.
Because she's accustomed to doing things,
XYZ Hospital's way.
XYZ Hospital's way, not our way. Cheryl has found greatest success hiring for attitude and basically good skills and training them than hiring people with the expertise from a hospital in the credentialing arena. So it's kind of like, I think that's probably, that's an interesting thing here. You're not, I think it's important for people who work for Synernet today. It's great if they have the hospital experience. That's a plus. But they really have to have the attitude that's really customer service and customer focused first. Customer centric is the number one thing for us. That is the driving force. And so that means that if your customer base is 15, 20, 30 organizations, they're all equal. They're all important.
Right.
They're all important. And so I think there's a different mentality. And I had that situation a couple of years ago in my coding arena. I was looking, my director of coding who started our program decided that managing a revenue generating, even though she was extremely adept and well respected in that arena, this was not her bag. Okay. Being responsible for a revenue line, employees, and generating monthly revenue and servicing multiple was not her bag. And so my question is, who in the HIM community within the state of Maine can fill your role? And it's like, not too many people, because you want a person who is not just an expert in their discipline. You want a person who has, managerial and leadership skills to run a small business, basically. Right. So it's different, it's a little different. So, yeah. That's the kind of people that we need to have in this organization. And we need to have employees who have a positive customer-centric attitude. Okay. Attitude is key.
So in 2000, shortly after you came, you actually, Synernet actually joined up with Maine Health. Is that correct?
So
what was that strategically? How did you make that decision?
And what did
that mean for the organization?
So once I got to the state, my chairman at the time, who was CEO up at Franklin Memorial, sat down with me and he said, you know this collaborative co-op model we have? He goes, forget this member-based dues function. You need to figure out how to do business with any organization in the state who can match up to the services that you provide. And at the time, we did no business with Maine Health, a Maine Medical Center, Maine General, Eastern Maine Healthcare, any of the big guys. I mean, it was a small guys club. So I took about that first year. Synernet had a good reputation. We had a good brand recognition within the state, not only among the smaller hospital community where we were, that was our forte. People knew who we were. So I met with just about every CEO in the state of Maine that first 2 years. As I began working through my notes, talking to my chair, talking to a couple of other members of my board who were saying, Gerry, you got to figure out how this evolving force in the state of Maine Health, can be at our camp. I mean, really.
Yeah.
And so, I had a meeting with the key leaders at Maine Health and made a presentation about who we are, what we do, and I said, we're looking for partnerships here in some of these, key areas that we work in, clinical engineering. And the CEO at the time, Don McDowell, who was preceded Bill Karen, said, he goes, what's new now? He goes, we've tried to approach you guys in the past about trying to work together, and we're kind of like rebuffed. And I go, it's the new game. Okay. This is a new world. I go, our survival going forward is going to be built on our ability to have scale, and we can't get enough scale from if we don't work with the larger entities in the state, whether they're individual like yourself, or have broader membership. And Maine Health is actually in the process of, and they've been very, they know how to create the right kind of control in their ownership and governance structure to give them the kind of ownership and control they want, but they don't necessarily control day-to-day what you do on a day-to-day basis. And so, the way they had structured most of their arrangements, and now they're re-examining that now 15 years later, or 14 years later,
Sure.
We never really consolidated assets. Maine Health is a system, and I guess most hospital systems are not consolidation of assets. They're basically member control, controlled by a large entity of board and things like that, but not actually consolidation of assets. So Maine Health, familiar with the model, understood the issues of control, and came back to us with a proposal that made Synernet an entity of Maine Health.
Okay.
With the same status as any of their hospitals, where Maine Health would have basically Class A shares, which they do.
Okay.
The remaining hospitals would have Class B shares. And the only difference between the Class A and the Class B is Class A, it has controlling stock. And so if the company wants to close down, be sold, or if you want to borrow any real big money, they need to have a say in it. Otherwise, what they do is they delegate the operation of the organization to the Class A and Class B shareholders equally. So my board is equally composed of 4 Class A members and 4 Class B members.
Okay.
So there's a balance, so there's power, Maine Health is the Class A shareholder and the owner, technically, but everyone has equity.
Okay. So the Class B holders are more like stakeholders rather than...
stakeholders, but I think that the intent at the time was, let's keep them at the table as a stakeholder and not just say, well, we'll take over Synernet. They could have done that.
Yeah.
They could have easily said, not only are we going to match the capital that's in the organization, but we're going to pay you back for the other capital, and we're going to own the whole company. And I think the idea was, no, we'll keep them at the table as stakeholders. And actually, it was a good model. We revisited it a couple of times since then. We said we revisit it in 3 years. I remember 3 years after we formed it. And it said, no, this model's working. It's a good model.
Yeah.
Let's just keep it the way it is. Why do we want to change it?
What's the benefit of having the Class B shareholders on the board? What's the benefit to Synernet and to those shareholders?
The benefit to the shareholders is that they're involved in the decision making. Okay. I mean, they control the organization. I mean, our strategy, our plans, our fund, everything. I mean, they're the ones who drive it. I mean, and they're Class B or Class A. The board members have equal. Okay. So it's been a good structure. I think it may undergo some fundamental reevaluation in the next 3 to 5 years here, or because the number of independent entities in the state of Maine is shrinking rapidly.
Right.
And so it's not unrealistic that at some point Maine Health would assume all. But as of right now, we're still working under that model, and I think our intent is to work under that model for a period of time. So the idea to bring Maine Health on board was access to more scale in the state. And,
So you could then sell to Maine Health
build more services. And so what it did for us was kind of bring more scale to the table, not guaranteed scale, because I can tell you that we have sold every one of our customers and every one of our services based on what we do and how we do it and the value we deliver.
So Maine Health doesn't tell
Not because Maine Health said, you're going to do
you'll
this.
You'll use Synernet. Yeah.
Right. They've never done that.
Okay. So it's still up to you to go, even a Maine Health entity, it's still up to you to say, hey, we'd like you to be a customer.
Right.
And they can say no.
Right. And, Bill, can you call Tim over at that hospital and suggest to him that, we got a great proposal on the table? Sure, Gerald.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah. You got a little bit of an inside advantage.
I give just a little bit of an inside advantage.
But they don't have to buy.
They don't have to. I mean, in some cases, and if they have it. But much to my staff's it's like, why aren't they doing this? And I go, because, they have another choice. I mean, it's a free market. I mean, we operate in a free market. So what's happened since the Maine Health is, credentialing was something we never did before. And we assumed a staff of 4 people that they had in their PHO that used to do the credentialing work for their PHO.
And a PHO is, for
Physician Hospital Organization. Okay. A creation that some hospitals, organization that many hospitals created in order to jointly contract with third parties where you have independent physicians who aren't employees of the hospital, so you don't have a real contracting arm. So in order to do that, you need to put together an organization. So the physician's interests are represented in the PHO, the hospital's interests here, and then they jointly contract through the 2 organizations with third parties and things like that.
Gives more scale when they negotiate.
More scale. So they're not negotiating individual. So the PHO gives doctors more leverage, and it allows the hospitals and the doctors to go jointly, to the third parties. So we took those folks over, and I said, now we've got 16 to 17 people doing credentialing work. I mean,
you've quadrupled the size of your staff.
Yeah, we quadrupled the size of it, and we do it all over the state, and we do it from York all the way to Fort Kent.
Okay.
Up through, Maine General is our customer, Central Maine. We even do it for Central Maine Healthcare, which is, the dynamics between Maine Medical Center and Central Maine Healthcare are not positive. That's like
this is competition.
Yeah.
It's Maine Health competition, but you're selling your services.
This is something that sits in this box over here. It's not competitive. We don't view it as competitive. Actually, it's a positive for providers. In those cases, you don't get too much of that, but we get overlap here in Portland in particular, where if you're a provider and you're applying for privilege, usually you work at both. Most independent providers here work at both Maine Medical Center and Mercy. And so you've got to get credentialed and privileged at both organizations. So we facilitate that process. You do it one time with us.
Yeah.
Because we coordinate it so it's on your birth date. And so we have it set up with both of the organizations, and on the birth date, this guy will come. So he submits his application once to us as opposed to having it submitted at different times in a different way. So it's a great administrative simplification for providers who sometimes today are very overwhelmed by the administrative details that they have to fall to, attend to. So that service has grown fabulously. And then, we started, we do things, we do things based on the market, what the market tells us to do.
Yeah.
Transcription was an item actually that was on the radar screen of Maine Health's administrative integration targets. I said, transcription, I had a list of opportunities, and I said, we're going to pursue that, to Bill and Frank at the time, and I said, so we pursued it and did the due diligence, collected data from all the hospitals around the state, and, put a pro forma together and decided that, our best effort here is to try to create a transcription service. This was in 2004, but it took one of our smaller entities, Franklin Memorial, to step up to the table and say, Gerry, I'm going to give you my department of 8 transcriptionists, outsource them to you, and you sell the service back to me. It took somebody really to step up. That's what it takes. Okay. It takes enabling scale of some sort to get one of these services off the ground.
So this is a group that was existing, a team that was already existing at a local hospital.
At a local hospital, right.
And you took them over?
We took them over.
And they stayed there?
And most of them stay, yeah. We moved them off-site.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we moved them off-site.
Okay.
That was one of Rick's stipulations was, you have to if you open an office, it's got to be in our community here. So we opened up an office in the Wilton Bass Shoe Factory and moved in there and had renovated some beautiful space there. Actually, it was magnificent space. Real high ceilings, all that great old pine, raw pine, and it was exposed. It was beautiful. It overlooked the river, the creek. It's a beautiful space. Well, within a year, everybody was home.
They were working from home.
You were working from home. Okay. Within a year and a half or so, we leased the space, and we realized that the model for growth was not going to be locally there, because the only way we're going to grow this business was, if we picked up a customer in Camden, which was our next customer, or Rockland, Penn Bay Medical Center, those transcriptionists weren't moving to Wilton, so we had to figure out a way. So it became a home-based model. We kind of became a home-based model very quickly out the door. And today, we have almost 200 employees in that division, in that area.
In transcription?
Yeah.
Scattered around the state?
Around the country.
Around the country?
Yeah, we've gone national.
So you try to place them close to a facility that they're...
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily. No. Okay. It's where we can get talent, and our challenge there is finding people who, most of these people understand how to work at home because they've done it. My challenge there is finding people who are very productive. Meet high productivity standards and quality standards, because that's what we sell. So, our ability to sell to a hospital is based on our price, and if we can't be productive, then we can't make our margins.
Sure.
So it's a very challenging, narrow margin business. So the wheels always keep turning, and, in response to HIM staff, HIM people in the communities, they go, well, if you're doing this, why don't you do coding work? It's just a logical thing, so we've assessed that, and about 4 years ago, the IT dynamics got to the point where it's possible for staff to work remotely. And access has improved, but you got to get access to all the patient's records through an IT connection. And so a lot of hospitals online access, the records were online. So it's a real challenge to work remotely, but eventually we were able to start the program, and, all our 95% of the time our coders work remotely from home, linked into the hospital's system to do coding work. Again, response to the marketplace, listening, understanding the dynamics, being able to offer a product at a price point that's below the national firms that do that kind of work is really important, because, why are we buying you? Well, we must be price competitive.
Yeah.
So that one, it's the same thing, market. And we listen to the market with regard to our provider enrollment services.
Let me summarize kind of the flow as I understand how Synernet has gone.
Yeah.
You start out as a group purchasing organization. You added on biomedical equipment repair, workers' compensation.
Right.
You then add on credentialing verification, which we talked a little bit about. You added on transcription. And then you decide to exit group purchasing.
Yeah.
What was the decision point there? Why? Because that seems like that was one of your personal background areas.
Couldn't be a big enough player.
Couldn't be a big enough player. Okay, so you couldn't get to scale.
Couldn't get to scale. Couldn't be a big enough player. The systems themselves were creating their own internal GPOs and working with nationals, and it was like, how can I compete with Maine Medical Center when Maine Medical Center is part of Maine Health, and then they have the smaller entity? It was not.
You just weren't going to be able to generate
we weren't going
to
be able.
So the big thing for you is finding things that you can scale and then you have to jettison the things that you can't.
Scalability, scalability and size. Scale is great, and I can tell you, to a certain point, And after that, it becomes almost like diseconomies of scale because,
Okay.
At a point, you've got to add infrastructure, you got to add support. It's just, there's certain, scale is good though. Don't get me wrong, scale is good, but that's the key. It needs to be scalable and buildable, right?
Then you added on provider enrollment services.
Right.
What is that?
Provider enrollment services are if you're a independent or any kind of a practitioner or a physician or an allied health professional, and you need to get paid by third-party payers, you need to economically credential with them. So you need to send every third party that you want to get paid for, you got to fill out their form and send it to them.
So that they know you're actually a credentialed provider, and that they
you're a
should
credentialed provider, and they can pay you, and they will pay you. So
so this is a service you provide, one-stop shopping, essentially. Is that how
right?
Is that okay?
Yeah, so the hospitals that we work for, if they have a new provider that's employed by them, we'll enroll them. We'll take care of all enrollment
in all the different
the different third-party plans that are affiliated with their hospital.
Okay,
we'll take care of it. And what we do there is we leverage. Most of those customers, I think are upstream customers of ours in credentialing.
Okay.
So we've captured like 80% of their data already.
Okay.
So now we're verifying it and we're augmenting it with specific.
So there's a synergy there.
Yeah, or specific information that needs to be added for the third-party billing, because in our credentialing database, we don't have necessarily have all their practice addresses, the locations, who in the practice might bill for services. That's not an acronym. And those are the kind of things that, you have to do. And if a practice is applying to be paid for services from Anthem, they got to fill out these forms and they got to answer all these questions. So what we've done effectively is we've automated that. Okay. We've got the data and then we populate those forms automatically.
All right.
This is not magic. It's not rocket science.
Right.
It's just.
But it's more convenient to have.
It's convenient.
Have you, who you're already doing their credentialing stuff, is just more convenient. Rather than setting up something at their facility to do it, they hire you to do it.
It expedites the process, and it provides a good tracking mechanism as you've automated the data now, and so you can get reports of I sent these applications to Anthem or to Medicaid or to Harvard Pilgrim 30 days ago, and I haven't gotten a response back in terms of whether, you know what I mean? So you've got a tracking mechanism. In most organizations, that is currently done, well, if it's an independent practitioner, they're doing it on their own. If it's an organization, a hospital, it's typically done maybe in an organized fashion, but in a lot of times it's fragmented. You got different practices the hospital has acquired over time, and so the practice managers in each of the organizations are still doing that. So trying to aggregate that function. If you go to a hospital, it's not easy to find where that function is. It can be disparately dispersed across the organization. So we provide it's an excellent service. So it's really, it's going to good growth opportunities for us.
So what's your theme for what is Synernet really focused on now? What's the strategic direction that you're taking the organization?
Well, our strategic direction is fivefold right now. Number one, it's sustained growth in each of our businesses, because we think that does two things. Number one, it builds scale and it solidifies the businesses that we have. And number two, it broadens our expertise because we learn from new customers. So we continue to grow. Our two, what I call big things for us are customer service, customer intimacy. We've determined there are three things that you can distinguish yourself competitively on: low-cost provider, high-tech answer, customer intimacy. We're not going to be low-cost. We're not necessarily going to be the low-cost provider, but we're not going to be the biggest we're not going to be the Walmart of anything we do. I don't have Bell Lab. I don't have Rand Research doing.
Right.
But I can be good at being the best with my customers in terms of, I call it customer intimacy, knowing the customer, responsiveness, follow-up, timeliness. And so we're a big focus across all all our service areas to focus on the customer relationship and customer engagement. And similarly, the other aspect of that is, I tell people, the customer's first, employees right there. The next second piece of this is our employees. So employee engagement is really high up on our strategic priority list right now, because without good employees, I have nothing to deliver. Without a customer, I don't have a service. I don't have anybody to provide a service to, but without the employees, I can't provide a service. Because those are our two big, that's our big resource. Our resources are employees. And then, we glue it together with some IT stuff, which that's a challenge in and of itself, is managing IT. But those are, and our growth, our growth is different in each of our individual businesses depending on where they are. Or what they do and who they serve. So,
and you are reaching out beyond Maine, though, right? You are
absolutely
out.
Our market. Well, yes, and actually in our plan this summer, our market is wherever the opportunity presents itself, where we believe that, I think we expressed it in the strategic plan, where we believe our competencies and our capabilities can provide the service, effectively. So we're not limited by geography, only limited by our capacities.
Okay.
And capacities are limited by talent, recruiting talent, finding good people, and secondly by just resource constraints. IT. IT is always a challenge. Especially in today's world. Cybersecurity issues, you add another layer of overhead, another layer of cost to protect and mitigate against those kind of risks, because we're totally IT driven.
Yeah. And if you're dealing with coding, you're looking at patient records and all kinds. Right. That's very important stuff.
All those kinds of things. Yeah. So those kind of infrastructure challenges, they're infrastructure, but they're really strategic for us. If we don't focus on those, we won't be. We'll be successful. And the internet accessibility for us is a challenge, because we don't necessarily control the internet accessibility for any of our employees. Our employees are...
If they're working from home.
And they could be with an internet carrier. I forgot, transcription has used 25 different internet carriers. So we don't have any control of who the internet carriers are that they have,
Sure.
Somehow they have to get to us. We actually have technology now. It's amazing. We have software that we can put what we call is an agent on an individual's machine, and it'll show us all the points between here and our data center that they stop. And there's usually like more than 8. It's more than 8. It's at least 8 usually, because they'll go from. You could go from Maine to Massachusetts to New York and then back to Maine, in order to get here. On the internet backbones that are out there. So that's that whole issue. A lot of our models based on the internet. And if they're not investing in the infrastructure to build the bandwidth and the capacity on that internet, we can be really challenged. And we're seeing, the past year we've had increased issues with our remote workers and internet access.
Okay. About how many workers in total does Synernet?
About 270 now.
270. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you say are some of the most difficult strategic decisions you've had to make as CEO?
The difficult decisions I've ever had to make don't have to do with strategy.
No.
They have to do with people.
Okay.
They have to do with developing people to meet the leadership or demands of their position, or moving them out of the organization.
Okay.
Those are not easy things. Those are difficult things to do, especially when they're senior people, and when you realize that it impacts personal lives and careers, and you never know a lot of different things. Those are real difficult decisions that any CEO struggles with. And my sense is that in retrospect, as I look back on my career, I've generally made those calls way before I made the move. And that's probably one of the, I'd call it one of my blind spots. Okay. Is giving people more opportunities when I know that I really should be making the move.
Okay. So you wait a little too long.
I may wait a little too long.
Okay.
Difficult. I guess that comes down to who you are as a person, and you always try to give people the benefit. I don't call it the benefit of the doubt. Some of the cases I'm describing have to do with somebody just not. They're not the person you need to lead a particular area, or they're not doing it. So those are very difficult decisions. I mean, it's always a difficult decision to decide if you're going to make an investment, or step up and buy. Like we had to invest in provider enrollment. So I mean, we had to make a capital decision and say we're really going to get into this business. In order to get into this business, we got to buy the technology infrastructure to support it,
right?
And we have to hire somebody, and say. So we have to invest whatever it is, a couple $100,000 with knowing that we don't really have anything coming in yet. Those are difficult decisions that you make based on, hopefully you do the due diligence and you take all the factors you have, and you make, sooner or later you have to make a decision with incomplete. We don't always have all the data.
Right.
You have to go with, the services we've focused on and built, we haven't had to back away from them, which is so we generally know, we feel the market wants it and there's an opportunity, and we know we just have to fill it, and then we have to, build the scale to kind of support it. So I think the people decisions are the toughest. They're really difficult.
What's a day in the life of the CEO of Synernet like?
I think it's like, it would be like three things. For me, it's a lot of one-on-one interaction with my leadership team in either routine one-on-ones that we schedule every other time, or to follow up on a specific thing initiative that we're trying to get. So it's a piece of that. The second piece is the external contact and talking to customers. Meeting with customers, seeing customers. I really like to go out. I love it when I'm on the road. I love it when I'm not in the office. Okay. And I can say, man, I've been on the road today. I was talking to, I get energized, Yeah. The good news is when I usually go see a customer, I'm not going in there and they go, Gerry, I really talk about this problem I've had with one of your services. God bless me. I got great people who do great work, and generally we're just having a very good positive conversation about what's going on, what the future is, where they are. But that's a big piece of what I need to do and what I do. It's like Tuesday, I was up in Augusta meeting with somebody from Eastern Maine Healthcare about collaborative opportunities between Maine Health and Eastern Maine Healthcare, which that's part of something that I'm focused, one of my projects that I'm working on. But that's an external kind of thing, I enjoyed doing that. I came back, I had a meeting in the afternoon here in the office with two of my leadership team, one-on-one meetings, and then I spent the rest of the day probably working on projects that I have. One of the big projects I have right now is moving our offices. We're going to be moving our offices from this building. So I do a little of everything. I really enjoy the external customer relationship stuff a lot. Managing my leadership team, working with my leadership team, and thirdly, just, a laundry list of products. On that laundry list is a succession plan and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Which I need to get to my board by May.
Uh-oh.
So, yeah, it's a blend. It's a blend. And I kind of like that. It's not one thing.
What do you worry about most? What keeps you up at night when you're thinking about the organization? Is it any one thing, or is it? No. I think the thing I worry most about is financial performance of the organization, being able to sustain in this environment where my customers' revenue base is not growing. Right. Right. You're selling to an industry that's
it's like this.
Times. Right.
It's like this if we're lucky, and most of them are going like this.
Yeah.
And, they're on a downslope, and so I'm downstream from that. And so it's difficult not difficult. Our challenge is to continue to grow value in our organization.
Yeah.
And maintain that margin of profitability.
And they're hiring you because they're being squeezed, right? They
hiring me because they're getting squeezed.
Right.
They're hopefully hiring us because we're getting squeezed, and we think we can do it in a better way.
Yeah.
And So I think that just because it's not the stable environment. I mean, it's a very dynamic, changing environment. I mean, so I think financial profitability, and the other thing that does wake me up occasionally is IT issues. They just do. Because I mean,
security kind of stuff?
Security stuff or the glue or that whole thing. I mean, last year, this is I just relate this incident to you, and a number of physicians in Portland had their, there was a big national thing with this too. Had false tax returns filed, and it just happened. It popped up on the radar screen of a number of docs within the close community here of Portland within a short period of time. And I mean, who has all the physician information in this town? Synernet. So I mean, we came under scrutiny for about 2 months. I got to tell you, my IT folks and my credentialing people did an unbelievable job. I mean, there was no way to prove that that's where the data came from. Eventually, though, I don't know, one of the large national credit bureaus there was a big data that was identified in one of the big national credit search firms. But that kind of stuff keeps me up.
Yeah, sure.
That kind of stuff really keeps me up.
Sure.
Because to my IT guy he goes, we can mitigate risk, but we can't eliminate them. I mean, if somebody really wants to get you, they're going to get you. So.
What surprised you most about the CEO role once you stepped into it?
It's lonely at the top.
It's lonely at the top. So what do you mean by that?
I never really understood what that meant until I was the CEO.
Okay.
It's a lot of things I can't share with my management team. There's a lot of things I can't share with my board. If I share with my management team, I'm talking to them about things that might impact another one of their colleagues, or I can't talk about performance issues related to one of their colleagues. If I share stuff like that with my board, it's like, oh, geez, a person works in your organization, you have those kind of issues with them. So I mean, I just really it's difficult sometimes, or it's and even this whole issue of succession is not. I mean, because once you tell somebody you're leaving, I'm going to leave that date, then it's a done. I mean, that's the date that sticks in their mind. So I haven't given them a firm date yet. They know that. They're waiting for something. Yeah. So, I mean, it's long. I don't have a lot of people that sometimes I can talk to about things that are front and center on my mind. So I have joined a CEO networking group called Vistage.
Okay.
It's a national organization that provides a forum for CEOs to get together on a local basis, and they're huge. They've got like 7,000 or 8,000 members across the country in different regional networks that are set up and chaired by what they call a chair, a Vistage chair in the region. And you get together monthly, and generally the format is a speaker of some sort on an important topic, whether it's growth, employees, business continuity, going green. And then what we do is we process issues, and everybody checks in as how they're doing in their personal, professional life and where we are. And then we go down the list and people say, this is one of my big issues that I'm dealing with right now. And we list them out, and then we prioritize them, and we decide based on that, well, we should help Mark talk about that issue, and then we process it with a group of other CEOs. Nice.
Okay.
So it's nothing. It's nothing. It's not magical stuff. It's peers networking, and your ability to basically, with confidentiality. It's ability to share whatever you're thinking. Yeah. I really can't tell my management team on my board the strengths and weaknesses of all my management team.
Right.
I know.
Yeah.
They're not sharing it with all my board members, but some of them are my customers. That's my big challenge in that regard, is that my board are my customers also. And so I got to really be careful what I say to them sometimes. Right. So that's a real challenge. That's probably one of the most I really understand when they say it's lonely at the top. I really understand that now. Okay. I really do.
If you could go back in time to 1999 and meet your 1999 self, what advice would you give him as he stepped into the role? What caught you by surprise, maybe, I guess? Right, so you said lonely at the top, but what would you tell him? Hey, be ready for this. This is...
I think, you have to, and I'm tolerant. I think you've got to be tolerant of, I'm pretty good at this though. I'm tolerant of the politics, and the system dynamics that go on, and the slowness of people to react. And I guess, if I had to go back, I'd go, I really should have gone with my gut a few more times. My gut told me what I was supposed to do a year before I did it.
Yeah.
Like I was telling you about people.
Yeah.
It's really, so now I'm 65 years old. So I finally figured that out. I'm almost retired.
Right.
It took me a lifetime to figure out that my gut isn't my gut is not bad. My gut is pretty good. It usually tells me what I should be doing. But it takes,
So trust your gut would have been
trust my gut.
Be your advice to yourself 17 years ago.
Trust my gut.
Let's talk a little bit about leadership. What would you say is your leadership philosophy?
I've probably done a lot more leadership reading in the past 4 or 5 years than I ever did before. But no, really. This is what I think. But my philosophy is servant leadership.
Okay.
I really. We all have egos, and we all have an ego. But I just never consider myself egotistical enough to know it all or to know everything. Like a lot of leaders come on. My view is that my role here is to facilitate the managers and the leaders that I have working for me, and to provide them, help them to achieve the goals that they set for themselves and that we set jointly for the organization. And I'm an advisor. And I've got to, and I know I have to make the tough calls occasionally because that's where my responsibilities are. But I never feel like I am the person. I'm the one who knows it. I know it all. So I view myself as a servant to my direct reports, to my employees, and to my customers.
What are the characteristics and behaviors of a good leader, and how do you aspire to those yourself?
Good leaders talk the talk, and then they walk it.
Okay.
They exemplify it. They demonstrate what they talk. So I believe, I don't know if I do that all the time, but I really try to do that all the time. That's my goal. If I'm asking, like I had a discussion with when I go, really, we have to be, so we've got to be the bigger, it's like, be the bigger person and take the first step and take the initiative. I says, we got to be the bigger person here and take the initiative with that customer. It's up to us to do that first. We should take the initiative. Don't wait for them to call you. Well, they're supposed to get back to me on that, and they haven't. And I go, well, I agree. They were. Actually, when we left that meeting, that was the idea. But take the step first.
Okay.
Step out there. Be the first person to take the lead. You never know.
How did you come to believe that these were the key aspects of leadership? Who do you think you learned leadership most from? And whose examples do you keep in mind when you're reflecting on leadership questions? Who do you reach back to in your mind?
Yeah, I kind of ask me who my heroes are.
Sure. Yeah.
Who are my heroes in life? I don't know if I have a solid answer for that.
Okay.
I really don't.
Okay.
I really don't. When I look at people, when I look at examples of, I look at organizations like Southwest Airlines, and that guy Herb Kelly who ran that organization for years, and I think he's gone now. But the kind of culture that they created there, which was one of service and having fun. This is not bad. Your employees are important in the service. I think that those are the kind of people that, when I look at those kind of people in the marketplace, those are the kind of people, or, for parallels to where I want to be. Those are the kind of people I want to try to be like, or I want our organization to be like.
Okay. What do you look for when you're hiring leaders and evaluating leaders?
Certainly, depending on what we're looking for, the technical and expertise that we're looking for, but I'd say 50% of it or even 60% of it is attitude and leadership and communication skills and ability to interact with people. I think it's a fine balance. I mean, I'm not saying that I'd hire somebody that's underqualified by 60%, because that's all I want. But I mean, I think the balance is almost in a leadership role is almost more tilted towards the communication, soft, and the emotional intelligence kind of skills, than to the technical skills.
You mentioned organizational culture a second ago with your reference to Southwest. What is organizational culture and why is it important? And how do you shape organizational culture?
I hate to use hackneyed terms, but I always say that culture trumps strategy all the time.
Okay.
I mean, I know strategy's cheap. I know, really. Go get the latest books on corporate strategy and customer. I mean, you can get that. Creating a culture where people want to come, look forward to coming to work, and look forward to providing the end product or the end service to your customers, and having customers who really have a appreciation for what you do, respect you, and want to partner with you. That's really what it's all about. I mean, I think that customer employee relationship and the employer relationship are the keys to providing, a great, and you really need to think about those two things, and you need to work at them. And it's not as simple as take this step, take next step, take next step. I mean, there's a lot involved in that, that emotional, this is emotional intelligence on both them in both of those dimensions that builds the right culture that you want to have. I mean,
you mentioned some folks who you considered to be mentors earlier in your career. How did they influence your thinking about leadership and about your career?
So it's interestingly, I probably wasn't really thinking about leadership.
Okay.
When I think back to the people who early on I said to you, geez, these people saw more in me than I saw in myself. And they saw capabilities and abilities and valued my opinions. And I kind of do a leadership by, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like that. I know that's not good.
So you see negative examples.
I see negative examples of what leadership is not and shouldn't be.
Okay.
So I don't know if I hold out someone as the paragon of that's the leader I want to be.
Okay.
I know what I don't want. I know what I don't want to be.
Aside from leadership in particular, how did these mentors help you develop your career or move forward in your career early on?
I think in many cases they gave me confidence in my abilities.
Is that what a good mentor does?
I think they have to. Yeah. Well, they give you Well, actually, a good mentor can help you develop your abilities also, or identifies how. One of my best mentoring stories, and I don't have very many, I don't, is my executive assistant, who's extremely smart. She's a very intelligent woman, very people adept. It's great people skills. And she never went to school, never got a degree. But had some kind of by nature of her role, she would do benefit enrollments and HR related work. And so I said, Seb, I go, have you thought about going back to college and getting an education? And, school's not for me. I don't want to go back to school. And I go, no, I'm not, there's a lot of programs for people who've been in the working world that go back to school and get certificates and stuff like that. So and that was one of our goals for the year, 7 or 8 years ago. We'd go look into, So she comes back and she goes, well, I identified this thing. And I said, so I goes, well, what do you think? I say, goes, well, I'm willing to give it a try. So, the first class she comes back from, first time, she goes, oh my God. She goes, all those people in that classroom are just like me. And so she went through and she got her PHR certificate from USM, and when it was I don't know how long was it, more than a year. It was a year and a half kind of stuff, and then she sat and got her certification as a certified professional in human resources very, very soon thereafter. And she probably will be sitting for the SPHR exam at some point in the future. And she's just worked into she's my HR administrator now. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Great.
She worked into her role, and not only is she good, I don't know if she could be the HR strategist for an organization with 1,000 people. Given the role, given where she is right now, she does an excellent job. And I've had her do employee mediation of employee situations with managers and employees and stuff like that. And the people come back and me go, "Thank God Debbie was there, man. She really helped us, She's just really good at that.
Yeah. So you identified this.
I identified it, and I was really pleased that I did. I mean, it was a mentoring of need, built out of need.
Okay.
I mean, I needed to mentor her because I really needed somebody to step into that role, and she was ready to do it. She did a great job of it. She's done a really great job of it.
How do you develop leaders in your organization? And what are your expectations for mentorship within the organization? So you've got leaders working for you.
Yeah.
What are your expectations of mentorship from them, to their people?
In the past 3 or 4 years, we've attempted to do a better job of helping each of our directors, level manager level people understand their leadership styles, who they are, how they do, why they get done what they get done, what are their, we've done 360 evaluations to try to give them some insight. I can say that as a corporate organization, corporately, we don't do a very good job of that. We just don't. It's one of those things that I know we need to spend more time on, but it's like we don't find enough time to spend the time on it that we need to spend on. Each of my directors have a sudden loss leader that they've identified. Do I remember the last time I sat down with my director and said, where are you in the plan to make sure in one area I know that the person is up to speed. So a
sudden loss leader, but you mean when
something happens to my director, there's somebody there to assume the responsibilities on a day-to-day basis until we determine, who's going to fill the director's role.
Okay.
And in the case of this individual, the one where we've really done it real well, it comes down to the individual. A lot of times it's the individual director, individual manager, and they're all not everyone's equally adept at doing those kinds of things.
Yeah,
they're just not.
Yeah.
So our overall corporate organizational development, I guess you would call organizational development, is not where I would like it to be.
Okay.
And not where it needs to be if we're going to be a 500 employee organization. You know what I mean? We really need to focus more attention on those areas. It would really be great if, we're very thin. We're in a very thin organization with not a lot of, it'd be great if I had HR staff support to kind of take initiative like that, and develop the programmatic stuff so that we can have each of our directors and managers run through these kind of things. I know it would be a great thing to do, but it's like,
most organizations don't have formal mentoring programs.
They don't. It's some of the good ones. If you read about them, they really do a real good job of that.
Yeah.
Organizations that have been real successful. But then again, you're talking about organizations that got scale, GE is really, I don't know, General Electric is notorious for being able to really build their managers, and create, managerial talent.
Now you're talking about tens of thousands of employees.
And leadership. Yeah, I know, leadership training and skills and all that kind of stuff. You're talking about that. So we try to leverage off everything we can do. And we're generally, usually try to bring every other management team meeting, every other month, just to try to bring something to the table that's of relevance to leadership. A couple months ago, we had a really good program on personal resiliency and what that means and how that really impacts you on a day-to-day basis and your employees. And so, I mean, we try to do things like that. It's not as organized as I'd like it to be.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's not as organized as I'd like it to be.
When did you get involved in ACHE? You mentioned a couple of other professional organizations that you've been involved with over the years.
ACHE I got involved in the early 90s.
Okay.
When I was at the Greater Cleveland Hospital Association.
And you've been you're the past president for Northern New England.
Yes. And I got involved with ACHE because, when I started working back at GCHA, and actually I think I may have gotten involved earlier than that. I may have had my membership before I went to GCHA, but I followed the development path when I got to GCHA and got my originally was CHE.
Right.
Certified Healthcare Executive. Took the exam early on. And I guess when I got to the GCHA, I started looking around and realizing that a lot of the professional peers and people that I was going to be working with, a lot of them were fellows of the college. And so I said, geez, I should be part of that organization. I mean, I think it demonstrates to them that I have the same level of professional credibility that they have, or the same level of professional interest that I did. So I got involved then and did that, and came here and got involved. And I was very active with the local chapter in Northeast Ohio.
How did it help your career? Why would it be important for young people to consider joining?
I think it helped my career by providing me a network of fellow colleagues and contacts that I could always call on, or either I frequently call people and go, "Do you know this person? I'm talking to this individual. Do you know him? And what can you tell me? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just a professional network of people that has it personally taken my career in a different direction. I can't say it has.
But has it enhanced it? Or
enhanced it.
That's what I meant.
It's enhanced
it. Changed it per se.
It's enhanced it, and because it's broadened my base of who I know. And from a selfish perspective, it's opened up numerous doors for us from a business perspective.
Sure.
That I might have
customers as well. Right.
But that I might not have been able to open as easily if I didn't have the collegial relationship that I had established through ACHA.
Okay.
And so I always tell people, people come to the table for these organizations for a whole host of different reasons. Mine was somewhat driven by selfishness.
Yeah.
My ability to make contact with the right people I need to make contact with at the right time, and thinking that this will be a great avenue to do that. Interestingly, I had what do you want to call it? A come to Jesus moment when I was regent, and I went to Chicago for the installment ceremony at the college, and we had to get all gowned up, walk down with our gowns, and I go, oh my God, Gerry, this is the level of professional competence and certification that you reach, that you're sitting on the stage with the CEO of this institution in California and the CEO of this institution in Texas, and you're one of them. I really felt really, really good about it. I've told people that, again, now numerous times, when you get your fellowship, go sit for the installation, because it'll give you a feeling of accomplishment and satisfaction and understanding. And that's what it did for me, that I never really had before. It's really, really great. It was a great experience.
So last question. What advice do you have for young people just starting a career in healthcare and healthcare administration? What should they be doing to be successful? What should they be reading? Who should they be talking to?
If you're just starting out in this world of work today, where things have changed so dramatically, you really need to be prepared to tell your story and talk to anybody and everybody who might potentially help you. So, I can only tell them that networking on the broadest possible basis, whether it's personal friends, colleagues, professional colleagues, people that your parents know. You really need to get out there and tell them who you are and what you want to do. Because the more you talk to people, the more ideas get generated. I don't think there's not a magic bullet anymore. I mean, I don't think it's as easy. I mean, I think it's more difficult today because you have so many qualified, very qualified, very intelligent, very well-educated competition that's out there in the marketplace, because the generation that came before me and my generation said, we're going to send all our kids to colleges and they all need an education, which I think is great. But the number of opportunities out there are limited, and you need to distinguish yourself. And I think you distinguish yourself through personal interaction with peers, both other peers or individuals who are in a position to potentially refer you or influence you or even hire you. I think that's where you need to be. You need to be at the forefront. I mean, I'm not a tech savvy person, and so I'm not. I don't think you can carry a campaign to find a job out on the internet. Maybe you can, or on Facebook. So my advice is you really gotta work at it. And it takes time.
Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate all the great information you shared.
I hope it'll be useful to you folks and a value to someone. If it's a value to one of your students, then it'll be a value, I guess. Right?
Yes. Thank you so much. You've been listening to the Health Leader Forge, a production of the College of Health and Human Services at the University of New Hampshire. Please go to our website, healthleaderforge.org, for more information or to leave comments about today's podcast. Look for Health Leader Forge podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and other podcast distribution sites. Thanks for being a part of the Health Leader Forge community, and we'll see you again in about 2 weeks.